Morning, everyone. I'm David Barish, Chairman of the Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board. As always, I ask you to put your various electronic devices on silent. That includes me. Today with us today, Fred Strathmeyer, representing Secretary Russell Redding at the Department of Agriculture, Jed Langen, representing Joe Torsella, and Kristen Heidingsfelder, representing Revenue Secretary Dan Hassel. Thank you all for coming and for your involvement. At this moment, I'd like to point out the obvious. I'd like to welcome our newest board member, Denise Smiler, who's joining us at our first public meeting. Good morning, Denise.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
A quorum and the members being present, I'll call proceedings to order. First order of business, the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
By way of announcements, the board held an executive session yesterday, Tuesday, October 29th, to discuss personnel matters and to conduct quasi-judicial deliberations relating to various matters coming before the board today. I'd also like to announce that funding for the local law enforcement grant program under Section 1408 of the Act is being re-implemented in this fiscal year. We will be posting updated guidelines for local law enforcement agencies to apply for grants to combat illegal gambling on our website. The date by which local enforcement agencies will need to apply for these grants shall be January 21st, 2020. Interested parties can get further details from our website. First order of business today, we have one public hearing scheduled on a petition from Stadium Casino for approval of a sports wagering certificate and all necessary approvals and authority to conduct sports wagering. Can I have the representatives from Stadium come forward? And spell your name for the court reporter prior to your presentation. And I'd also ask that all non-attorney witnesses stand at this time to be sworn.
I do.
Thank you. Petitioners may begin.
Good morning, and may it please the board. Chairman, Commissioners, my name is Mark Stewart, S-T-E-W-A-R-T, with the law firm of Eckert Siemens. I am here today on behalf of Stadium Casino RE LLC on its petition for a sports wagering certificate. With us and participating in today's presentation, we have Joe Weinberg, the CEO and principal of Cordish Gaming Group, Rob Norton, president of the Cordish Gaming Group, and I'll allow them to introduce themselves before they speak and spell their last name for the reporter. Joe Billheimer, executive vice president with the Cordish Gaming Group. We're also very pleased and honored to have with us Senator Kim Ward, Representative George Dunbar, and Hempfield Township Supervisor Rob Ritson. And they will be coming up and participating in our presentation when we get to that point of the presentation. With that, I'll turn it over to Joe.
Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Joe Weinberg, W-E-I-N-B-E-R-G. Just to give you a quick update, as you know, we're talking about our live casino hotel in Philadelphia and live casino in Westmoreland County. You have renderings of the two projects before you. Just in terms of the state of the projects as a general update, actually tomorrow we have the topping off ceremony for our Philadelphia facility. So the construction is moving along quite well. The building's enclosed and we're roaring ahead on construction. In Westmoreland County, we've already commenced demolition and we have our official groundbreaking in a couple of weeks in Westmoreland County. So we're very happy with the progress of the two projects and look forward to maintaining that schedule for late next year openings for both facilities. We're here today to talk about our sports wagering certificate. As you know, this is expanded scope of gaming, which we all look at as a good customer service, great for the Commonwealth, good for the industry. From the operator standpoint, from our standpoint, from the actual revenue generation directly from sports betting, it's minimal, but we really look at it particularly from the retail standpoint, as the ability to drive a new customer base into the casino, and there's a direct correlation between driving in new traffic to the casino and generating additional casino revenues. And I think we've seen that start to happen as sports betting has been implemented throughout the state. And Rob Norton will walk you through a little bit about how we see those benefits.
Good morning. My name is Rob Norton, Norton. The next slide that we have up just speaks a little bit to the short history of sports betting in Pennsylvania and the success that it has seen. This slide speaks mainly to the non-gaming lift, the non-sports betting gaming lift that we have seen in the competitors of add retail sports books to their facility. It's our general belief and our general theory that by activating the facility with great entertainment, great restaurants, sports betting, and all these different types of amenities, that you create an energy and an activity that will bring people in, that will game on your slots and tables. And at least in Pennsylvania so far, we've seen that hold true through the beginning stages of sports betting, that we have seen a lift. On the flip side, as you look at the direct revenues associated to sports betting, although it's been an impressive start, it is a very small fraction of the overall gaming revenue. And when you actually transmit that all the way through to the expected profitability of it, we anticipate the profitability of sports betting to be marginal at best. But we do believe in the overall energy, we do believe in the overall benefit, and we're excited to bring sports betting to both Westmoreland and to Philadelphia. With that said, our approach, we hope, is unique in that we plan to bring sports betting to these facilities with an overall vision of more of an entertainment style, of an inclusive style. So as we look at the Philadelphia property, we are a world-class facility that's being built right in the heart of the stadium district, where all of the major sports teams play in one location, and we are embracing that sports theme throughout the facility. So unlike many locations where you will see a singular sports betting location, we will have a sports book, and it'll be located in a nationally recognized restaurant concept. But we will also have sports betting integrated into additional bars, additional areas, additional entertainment areas, so that it becomes part of the lifeblood of the Philadelphia property. We have a couple renderings of our Philadelphia property up next. So this is an outside image of our nationally recognized restaurant, Sports and Social. Inside Sports and Social will be the sports book, along with sports viewing and social activities, music and other entertainment options that will go along with it. When you look at the map, the arrows will actually represent kind of all of the places within the casino that we intend to make sports betting available, either through additional windows or through kiosks throughout the floor. When we look at Westmoreland, our live Pittsburgh facility, this is an image of the sports bar. This is a two-level bar, again located within the nationally recognized restaurant that is one of the key moments of the entire facility. And we have our sports book located within that space. We think in both cases the sports book book is accretive to the overall energy and feel of the facility.
May I have your attention, please? May I have your attention?
Okay.
Got our
Got my
attention.
attention.
Keep going.
Just in case you didn't have enough coffee this morning.
Guys do that?
So, specifically speaking to the job creations, the Westmoreland facility, which is the smaller of the two, we're estimating 20 jobs at the retail book, about just under $1 million of salaries and wages for the year. We definitely anticipate increased visitation to the facility because of the venue that we are planning to build, including the sports betting. And again, as we stated early on, that the overall benefits will be not just in the direct sports betting revenue, but the ancillary revenue from other gaming, restaurants, and general overall activity.
Okay. And,
With that,
we'll ask Senator Ward, Representative Dunbar, Supervisor Ritson to come up. Obviously, part of this petition before you today involves Stadium Casino's request to conduct sports wagering at both its Category 2 and Category 4 facilities under a single certificate. And the Senator and Representative and Supervisor are here to provide some additional testimony to those issues. Senator?
Good morning. Thanks for having us. I am, as you said, State Senator.
Excuse me 1 second. Just want to make sure. Did we have you all sworn earlier?
Yeah, we were sworn in.
Thank you.
I'm Kim Ward. I represent the 39th Senatorial District that includes the Westmoreland Live Casino. First, let me start by saying thank you to all of you for your recent approval of the Cordish license to establish Westmoreland Live in Hemphill Township. Establishing non-primary locations throughout the Commonwealth had been a priority for me from the time I became a senator, and I realized the largesse and the amount of economic money that the counties with casinos had. And I was, why can't we have that? So I have been very, very supportive of this for a lot of years. So I'm here today in support of Cordish's application for a sports wagering license at both their Philadelphia Category 2 casino and the Westmoreland Category 4 casino. I'm here also to formally testify on the issue of legislative intent as it pertains to the $10 million licensing fee for sports wagering. As I mentioned earlier, I was very, always strong in helping to lead these efforts to expand gaming by establishing non-primary locations to areas that didn't have a casino. During the negotiating process on developing the legislation, it was articulated that these facilities would be secondary to operators who were already operating in the Commonwealth. They would be an extension of existing license holders that had paid originating licensing fees and were most often not using their maximum allowable table games and slot machines. Act 42 of 2017 was passed, and existing Category 1 and 2 license holders had the opportunity to bid on the newly formed Category 4 facilities. The state would generate revenue from both the fee from the sealed bids and the tax revenue from the non-utilized slot machines and table games. With the restrictions on sports wagering lifted nationwide, an additional license was made available to existing Category 1 and 2 casinos for a fee of $10 million. This $10 million fee was established for the original Cat 1 and Cat 2 license holders. In Act 42, an additional $10 million fee was never considered for newly established Category 4 casinos, and it doesn't make economic sense. It doesn't make economic sense for the Commonwealth, and it doesn't make economic sense for the Cat 1 and 2 casinos. Category 4 casinos are non-primary locations. Therefore, they're considered secondary to their parent casino. They are restricted by the slot machine and table game utilization of the parent casino. These secondary locations were designed to be economic drivers for both the Commonwealth and the counties in which they are located. Based on the size of these facilities, the sports wagering component will not be a direct primary revenue in Category 4 facilities. Rather, it will be part of the overall experience to increase slot and table game usage and enjoy entertainment options. Direct sports betting at a Category 4 facility will not justify a separate $10 million fee. So Act 47 of 2017 didn't include it. If this board decides that it's required, then the para casinos are left with a decision to possibly omit the sports wagering component from their facility and leaving a large hole in a comprehensive experience for patrons. This would have a negative effect on the communities. Additionally, as I mentioned earlier, the Category 4 casinos were created to establish a gaming presence in those areas that previously had none. Permitting sports wagering under the parent license will put these smaller facilities on par with off-track betting facilities in other parts of the state. In the case of Westmoreland Live, myself, Representative Dunbar, and local leaders feel that it is essential to have all of these options available to help redefine the Westmoreland Mall, which was dying, so we are very, very grateful for the casino, and the county's central commercial corridor. I just want you to know, before I close, that the question I get most when I'm out in the community and even coming through my social media is, when is the casino going to open? People in the county are pretty much overall very, very excited about this. I mean, they are looking forward to it. So in closing, I just want to reiterate how important this project is to our county and to our Commonwealth. All of you have administered your responsibilities with integrity and the Commonwealth's best interests. I ask that you once again consider the broader benefits to this Commonwealth by approving this application with just the one-time $10 million fee that includes Philly Live and Westmoreland Live, just as Act 47 authorized and intended it to be. Thank you very much for letting me speak with you this morning.
Thank you, Chairman Barish and Commissioners. I think it's relatively appropriate that on the 2-year anniversary of the signing of HB 271, which is now Act 42, that we would have a hearing on it, at least to clarify some of the thoughts of it. I have sent you all a letter. I also believe there's a letter from Leader Cutler expressing my views on what exactly transpired as far as the bill itself. And I'm not going to read it to you, but I just want to hit on a couple salient points. First off, some of you know how the sausage making takes place over here. That on an omnibus bill like this, several bills were put together. Several of my bills were input into Act 42. And each bill stood on its own and then was dropped into the omnibus bill. There wasn't a whole lot of thought about how this bill would affect any other, how the sports wagering bill would affect anything else, because sports wagering didn't exist at the federal level. There was no way, so it was just dropped in, and there wasn't much thought to how it would affect everything else. So when it was put in there, the language that was put in was written in a manner that to have sports wagering available in as many locations as possible. I confirmed this with the author of HB 519, which was a sports wagering bill, Representative Matzey, who told me, look, we put the non-primary locations in there so every casino could have a sports wagering if the federal government ever allowed it, and then non-primary locations were meant for off-track betting parlors to help those continue to exist. It was not. There was never any intent to limit it for the Cat 2s. It was just, the idea was to let it happen in as many places as possible. There was no consideration when that bill was written for the Cat 4s because they didn't exist either. And that was just another bill that was dropped into the omnibus bill. I will also tell you this, when that bill ran, the fiscal note on the bill, which the House prepares on every bill, had revenue assumptions in it. There were no revenue assumptions with that bill for sports wagering because, again, the federal government prohibited it. So, there's no fiscal note there as far as revenue assumptions for sports wagering. But since then, we have had budgets. We've had several budgets since then, 2 budgets since then. And in those budgets, there was never a revenue assumption made for Cat 4s for sports wagering. But I will tell you this, in the 1819 governor's budget, in his book, there's an assumption of $70 million for sports wagering licenses. And in 1920, $40 million. That's $110 million. That's 11 casinos worth. That's what the assumption was made. No assumptions were made for Category 4s ever to pay the $10 million. Also in this year's budget, there was a revenue assumption of $12.5 million for a table game fee for Cat 4s. There was no assumptions for sports wagering for Cat 4s in the governor's budget book. So, I know a lot of times when we do things, and some of you know that, we screw them up. I mean, let's admit, we don't always get everything right. And maybe we didn't get this completely right. But the one thing we did get right on Act 42 was the licensing fee and the tax rate, no matter what Governor Christie's out there saying. But we set that rate at $10 million and a tax rate at 36. And it was a very difficult decision for our Cat 1s and our Cat 2s to make fiscal sense of it. It was a very difficult decision for a Cat 1 and Cat 2. You understand, they are 10 times as large as a Cat 4. And they're having trouble making sense of it. And it wasn't until some Cat 1s and Cat 2s didn't make that decision to buy a sports wagering license until they saw the increased table games and increased slots that were coming with those that had purchased the licenses. So now the Cat 1s and Cat 2s, they at least feel somewhat comfortable, but it was a difficult decision for them. It's an impossibility for a Cat 4 to make fiscal sense of this. It just will not make any sense. So what will happen? A Cat 4 is not going to purchase it. If they're not going to spend $10 million, and what's going to happen in the renderings you just saw is you're going to have this beautiful sports wagering facility. You're going to have the TV sets all around. You're going to have the odds on the wall, and people are going to have to sit there and bet on their phones because they'll still be able to do that. So there's not a whole lot of sense in not allowing the Cat 2's license, sports wagering license, to apply to their Cat 4s. If anybody has any questions, I'll feel free to answer them as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good morning. My name is Rob Ritson. I currently am a township supervisor in Hempfield Township, which is the host municipality for Westmoreland Live. I too want to thank you. Yeah. R-I-T-S-O-N? Rob. Thanks. I too want to thank you for the recent approval. This is a highly anticipated project in Hempfield Township and in particularly Westmoreland County. And I'm here just to speak to the global application as it pertains to sports wagering in general and why we feel it's essential to have at Westmoreland Live. As this board is where the current facility is being proposed in what is now called Westmoreland Mall. Westmoreland Mall has seen the loss of 2 anchor stores in the last 2 years. We're fortunate that one of those anchor facilities is being filled by the current Westmoreland Live, but we have a sizable facility where Sears occupied that is now empty. As the landscape of commercial retail changes, we are working hard to try to redefine what commercial corridors look like, and this casino is going to be the catalyst in helping us do that. And we feel that as the casino sits in its current form and with the proposal of sports wagering, that it will be an entertainment destination for us in central Westmoreland. We are a bedroom community, trying hard to maintain the commercial end, trying hard to recruit industrial areas, but in the end, we're a bedroom community. And the idea is to provide a comprehensive entertainment facility that will spawn new commercial opportunities in the developable area. And that will include a lot of redevelopment as well, not just the mall, but the areas around the mall. So, as a representative of the community that this is housed in, as someone who works with our neighboring municipalities as well, we're incredibly excited about the opportunity that this provides us. We know that once you gave your approval for the license, and hopefully give your approval for the sports wagering, then it's our job to move beyond the current casino and start to look at facilitating better opportunities for development around that. Take advantage of what Stadium Casino and what all of you have already done. So again, I really, on behalf of the Hempfield supervisors, I appreciate the approval. We are excited to begin, and I hope that you'll look favorably upon their wagering application, and we can all get moving forward in Central Westmoreland.
Thank you. What I'm going to do is do something slightly out of order because of your schedules. If there are going to be questions for the senator, the rep, or the supervisor from the board, I would ask people to put the questions now if there are questions. Okay. Thank you very much. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see it. 1 second. I thought there's. Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just wondering if any of the legislators had proposed any amendments to the Gaming Act to clear up this ambiguity, if there is an ambiguity.
We discussed doing so. We discussed it.
If you're asking if we amendment now, is that what you're talking about?
Did you? Yeah, I mean, since this
Since
issue
this
has
came to
come
light.
up.
I believe that you as a board have that authority to do that at this point in time. I mean, if for some reason, we can't get there, I guess we could do that. We certainly have considered it, but we believe that you guys have that ability to do that, to make the decision.
Since there's no prohibition in the act, what the representative is saying is it's a matter of interpretation, and certainly that's the board's role.
And we have discussed doing exactly that, because we do feel strongly the intent of the legislation was not to charge twice. Intent, yes, we've talked about it.
Mark?
Thank you, Chairman. Representative Dunbar, thank you for the explanation on how this got put together. Do you recall in the legislation, does each Category 1, does it specifically say each Category 1 location pays the $10 million for sports wagering?
It does not specifically state each Category 1, it just, each casino could pay the $10 million licensing fee.
For example, I think Penn National also owns the Meadows, right? It's my understanding that both locations have paid the $10 million, whether they did or maybe that one of their providers paid it, but can you help walk me through that process?
So I also, and I'm not sure exactly when we passed the rules for that you can own more than one casino too. I'm not sure when that actually happened either, timing-wise. But it just was a $10 million licensing fee per casino.
It says per casino, though.
Per casino, but it didn't specify Cat 1 or Cat 2, that in my knowledge. It did mention the non-primary locations, but it did not specify the Cat 1s and Cat 2s.
But the Meadows is huge. You know, those are huge casinos. These Cat 4s are limited with the amount of number of slots and tables that are permitted by the law. So it wouldn't make sense. There is no way they can pay $10 million for a facility that is a fifth of the size of those larger facilities. Because we're looking at the overall experience, we're looking at getting as many people into these facilities as we can. We're looking for more people to play tables and more people to play slots. Then, you know, we need to make this sports wagering accessible and affordable, but it is not at $10 million.
And as the senator alluded to, Commissioner, and the representative in his comments, you know, the structure of the act is such that you have essentially the primary casinos, which were the 1, 2s, and 3s that could bid on a Category 4, and the Category 4s are set up as kind of an ancillary casino. And we believe that structure enables the ancillary casinos to operate under a primary casino's certificate, but it would not allow 2 primary casinos like the Meadows and Hollywood to share. There's not that structure of, you know, the Meadows isn't dependent upon Hollywood for their slot machine count. They're 2 independent primary casinos, so they would each have to pay the $10 million, as opposed to the primary ancillary structure.
And I think there's also there's a couple other, at least the way I look at it, areas that are not economically fair. For example, if you have an OTB, you don't have to go through that either, right? But if we happen to go through the bidding process for a license for a Category 4, other than a casino-owned Category 4, if we had gone far enough, then you'd have possibly bidders that do not have a casino license in Pennsylvania. And if we grant this scenario here, then you would have an unbalanced playing field too, right? You would have a casino bidding and someone that doesn't have a casino, if the option is we're not going to have them pay the $10 million. So what you're saying is nobody should have to pay the $10 million for a Category 4, and that's what was silent in the legislation, but that was your intent. Did I conclude that correctly?
That is correct. And again, getting back to the economics of it, I don't know how a Category 4 can make sense of a $10 million licensing fee for sports wagering. And if they don't have sports wagering, the numbers have proven that their revenues are not going to be as high as they possibly can be. The jobs created will not be as high as they possibly could be.
Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thanks.
And just one more thing, and I thought George was going to, Representative Dunbar was going to say it because he was very important in getting it done, but the Majority Leader of the House, Brian Cutler, I believe you all have a letter from him?
Yeah, I did say that.
Did you? I guess I wasn't listening to you, George.
That's all right.
You know,
Used to that.
we've been together a long time. I just.
Okay.
And just while the senator and representative are here, you have packets in front of you that include all of our exhibits. Senator Ward's letter is identified as Stadium Exhibit 2. Representative Dunbar's is identified as Stadium Exhibit 3. Majority Leader Cutler's is identified as Stadium
Thank you.
Exhibit 4.
Let's keep going.
Thank you.
You can stay there for the minute, okay?
Sure.
Is Enforcement Council going to have any questions for these witnesses?
No, we don't.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for letting us be here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and the board for modifying the schedule.
Thank you.
If we may, oh, sorry.
Does the board have any questions for the other witnesses at this time? I'll proceed and hear from Enforcement Council and can swing back.
Mr. Chairman, I think they're in the middle of their presentation.
Oh, thank you. That's what you did to me. Okay.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Cyrus.
Yes, thank you, Cyrus. Moving on to the kind of the issue at hand here that we've been talking about. As we set forth in our papers, we believe that the structure and the text of the Act enable the board to allow sports wagering at both facilities under a single certificate. More importantly, the policies and the intent behind the Act support such an approach. And with the issue of authority resolved, the key question becomes what will provide the Commonwealth, the host community, gaming patrons, with the best, and the public with the best possible gaming facility and experience. And we believe that is having a full and comprehensive retail sports experience at the Category 4 casino. As I mentioned, the Act allows for it. If you look at the text, in several ways, the Category 4s are directly linked to the Category 1, 2, or 3 casinos. Certainly they were the only, in the initial round, they were the only ones who could bid for them. After Act 20 of 2019, the ability for non-Category 1, 2s, or 3s to bid was eliminated. In several instances, the Act literally conflates the two types of licenses and refers to a Category 1 licensee who is a Category 4 licensee. And of course, most importantly, the Category 4 facilities are wholly dependent on their primary casino for their slot machines. They literally are taking some of the 5,000 machine complement from the Philadelphia casino to be utilized in Westmoreland. Had a Category 3 casino obtained a Category 4 property, they would have had to buy more slot machines in order to have them at the Category 4 facility. So they're really fused together. And then when you look at Section 13C21's authorized location section, the section that deals with where they're authorized, the text is such that it permits operations at multiple facilities. Whenever there's ambiguity, as was referenced in a statute, the agency's role is to interpret it, and you do so by considering a variety of factors. First amongst them are the stated legislative intent and policies behind the Act. And the express one for Category 4 licenses that is laid out in Section 1102 of the Gaming Act is to ensure the sustainability and competitiveness of Pennsylvania's gaming industry. Having a complete sports betting experience at the Category 4 facilities does that. And the importance of these types of retail sports facilities and lounges has been written about quite a bit lately in the industry and in the trade publications. They've focused on it, and they've talked about how the design is really, it's been described as man cave meets casino. It's the type of place where people like to go. It's a blend of comfort and technology, of community and entertainment and sports, and it's a real experience that would be lacking if it wasn't permitted. Likewise, enabling those casinos, Category 4 casinos, to benefit from the additional revenue and the incremental revenue on slots and table games promotes the policy in Section 1102. Precluding such opportunities unless an additional $10 million fee, which, as was testified, is not economically feasible, undermines that sustainability and competitiveness. The other policies set forth in 1102 are also advanced. As was discussed, revenue generation will be maximized. Local share recipients will receive additional revenue as well. You're looking at the most possible jobs that can be created at the facility. As was testified, 20 jobs with good salaries and benefits are tied to the ability to conduct retail sports betting at the Westmoreland facility, and those will be lost if that opportunity cannot move forward. And as Supervisor Ritson really zeroed in on, entertainment and tourism at this facility, making it a regional asset in their economic hub is really vital, and that will further that legislative policy. As was alluded to, there is the issue and the opportunity of Category 1 facilities to locate or co-locate a non-primary location at their Category 4 casinos, and then have sports betting through that provision of the law. We think that if that is allowed to proceed, and as it seems it could, and the Category 2, Category 4s not be able to have a retail sports betting operation, you're setting up a situation where not all Category 4 casinos are on equal footing. And certainly, we don't think that advances the policies of the Gaming Act. We can skip through this slide quickly, but all of these benefits we've talked about are lost if an additional $10 million fee is required. The notion that there is some public benefit from that is really a mirage. You're basically, you would have a Category 4 casino paying the same amount, $10 million, as it could have for its slots and tables approval combined at the minimum bid and the table fee, but only for a source of revenue that's averaging around 2.1% of total gaming revenue at the properties that are currently conducting sports wagering. And if all Category 4 casinos had to have their own certificate, whether they're Category 1, 2 affiliates or not, you would have one instance where a casino would have to spend $30 million in order to have retail sports betting at each of its facilities. It's clearly a model that can't be justified economically. So at the end of the day, from a global perspective, the board has several options before it. We believe that the single certificate option is the best solution. The first option would be, as I mentioned, all Category 4 casinos have to have their own certificates. If that's how the board finds, it will mean no retail sports betting at the Category 4 casinos, and the result will be the loss of revenue and jobs, and it'll be bad for gaming patrons. Second option is really a have and have not situation where the 3 Category 4s that are affiliated with the Category 1s can co-locate a OTB there and have sports wagering, and the 2 Category 4 facilities that are affiliated or ancillary to the Category 2 facilities cannot. And it's a situation that results in disparate casino facilities and, again, lost revenue and jobs for the Commonwealth. And the final option is the single certificate approach. We believe it's the only one that advances both the Gaming Act's policies and is consistent with its structure and text. We think it's a 4-way win. It's the best solution for Pennsylvania, for the host communities, for gaming patrons, and for the licensees.
No, I just have one more thing to add, that when we made our bid for at auction for the Category 4, right or wrong, we assumed that we could bid the amount we did, which was $40 million, based on being able to get efficiencies from our Cat 2 in terms of management, in terms of license fees for online and for sports betting retail. So, we assumed in our upfront bid amount that we were going to be able to gain those efficiencies. That's how we read the law, and that's how we incorporated it into our bid analysis.
Okay.
And as just one point for record keeping, we would like to identify our presentation as Stadium's Exhibit 1.
Fine.
And OEC had proposed certain conditions. Generally, the conditions are acceptable with the acceptance of conditions 21 and 25, which had to do with the ability to start online and the requirement to file Actually, and the whole Westmoreland issue. So.
One of them is the online coming first.
Right.
And the other is the fee.
Yes.
Thank you. Enforcement Council.
Good morning, Chairman Barish, members of the board. David Tepper, T-E-P-P-E-R. We have a few questions for Stadium. How many of the 50 positions at your Category 2 licensed facility for retail sports betting will be full-time versus part-time?
I haven't spoken before. This is Joseph Billheimer, B-I-L-L-H-I-M-E-R. Right now, our expectation is that they are all full-time.
Is that the same with the 20 positions at your Category 4 licensed facility?
Yes.
Will smoking be allowed in the sports wagering areas at the proposed Category 2 licensed facility?
We haven't evaluated that yet.
And if the board approves sports wagering operations at the Category...
Sorry, I didn't hear your answer.
I'm sorry, we haven't evaluated that as it relates to the Indoor Smoking Act.
When will you evaluate it?
Very quickly.
If I may add to the answer on that, the questions are
What's very quickly?
somewhat difficult to answer because the fact that we, in the Category 2 location, we have sports betting throughout the facility, so the defined sports betting area within the restaurant is likely to not be smoking, but there's a windows next to the a bar in the casino which will have smoking in the immediate area. So I think there'll be, when we submit our final smoking plan for the entire facility, there'll be sections that will be included and excluded.
Thank you. And if the board approves sports wagering at your Category 4 licensed facility, will the sports bar area that's offering retail sports wagering be smoking or non-smoking?
The windows, the area where the windows are located for betting within the sports bar would most likely be non-smoking. The bar itself will have areas that have gaming that will likely have smoking, and other areas that will be non-smoking as well.
Thank you. Have you identified a platform provider or operator for sports wagering?
We have not finalized any agreements on that front yet. However, we are on the precipice of completing those negotiations and contracts, and look forward to bringing those details to PGCB very shortly.
If I could, just for clarification, the operator, without revealing what's going on, would it be one operator for both casino sites, or is it just for the major stadium site?
We would have one platform provider and partner for both locations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Based on your petition, you intend to offer interactive sports wagering prior to the opening of either your Category 2 or 4 licensed facilities. Is that correct?
Yes.
If you're granted a sports wagering certificate by the board, when do you anticipate launching interactive sports wagering?
Most likely, through all the approval process and the internal controls, we'd be looking towards the end of this year or the beginning of next year.
But the caveat is if you don't have to pay the 2 fees.
The internet portion would be under the single license. Either way, we would move forward with that.
Gotcha. Thank you.
And when do you anticipate that your Category 2 licensed facility will open in Philadelphia?
Our current timetable is the end of 2020.
And if you're granted a sports wagering certificate, when do you anticipate that land-based retail sports wagering will go live at your Category 2?
At the same time, end of 2020.
And when do you anticipate that your Category 4 licensed facility will open?
Our current estimates have it in the fourth quarter of 2020.
And if you're granted a sports wagering certificate, when do you anticipate that land-based retail sports wagering will go live at your Category 4 licensed facility?
In conjunction with the opening of that facility in the fourth quarter of 2020.
Have you made any plans to open a temporary facility prior to the opening of your Category 2 or Category 4 licensed facilities?
No.
Can you please explain to the board why you believe that operating the interactive prior to the retail does not violate Section 13C 22C of the Act, which requires that no sports wagering certificate holder may operate or offer sports wagering until the board determines that the sports wagering certificate holder is prepared in all respects to offer sports wagering to the public at the licensed facility.
Sure. I mean, we've addressed this in our answer to OEC's objection. There's various reasons for that. The first is that the provision itself, it actually affords discretion and authority to the board. It's not a limiting provision on the board. What it really says is prior to offering sports wagering to the public at a licensed facility, you have to have everything ready and have satisfied any conditions that the board puts on you. It certainly doesn't get into textually at all the difference between offering it online versus offering at a licensed facility, or the timing of those two endeavors. And, you know, the provision itself, I mean, this casino is somewhat unique amongst all the others because it's the only one that's not up and running and operational. Certainly, if it was the intention of the legislature to address this specific scenario, it would have done so in a more direct and explicit manner, and said, you know, if a casino is not up and running yet, it must start, it cannot start sports wagering. That's not what the law says. All it really says is you have to have satisfied all the conditions, and the board has to say you're ready to offer it at your licensed facility before you can start. At the licensed facility is how we would interpret that, and how we would suggest you would interpret that. Ultimately, none of the policy benefits of the Act are advanced by causing an unnecessary delay in a licensee starting online operations. It would ultimately probably delay the receipt of the $10 million, you know, for the certificate in general, if it can't start until a year from now, if Stadium can't start until a year from now.
Couple, just from a.
If I
sorry.
could, yeah. Just
Okay.
you
I
cut through.
disagree. I don't think it would delay the payment of the $10 million. Payment of $10 million would be 60 days from the date that the board approves the petition, the order.
Right. However, certainly, if the board is going to find that that it cannot be commenced ahead of time, it may impact how Stadium decides to proceed with this petition.
Okay.
in terms
That's
of-
fine.
I'd like to, if I could, let's not get into that kind of back and forth here. I just have a clarifying question. To date, how much money, not counting the fee that you paid, how much money has been invested in bricks and mortar to get these two operations up and running? How much you have
So thus
Ready to
far,
go.
and
in terms of the steel
I'll
and
give
everything
you a
else?
range, not
Yeah,
an
that's
exact
fine.
figure, but, you know, we have a total investment of about $850 million between the two facilities, of which we've,
Currently or when completed?
one complete, and to date, about half of that has been
Okay.
already invested in.
Thank you, thank you. Where are we?
We have no further questions for Stadium at this time.
No, you make your presentation.
Okay.
Okay.
The Office of Enforcement Counsel does not have a formal presentation or witnesses. However, we would like to make a brief statement. Stadium Casino RE LLC's petition to conduct sports wagering presents two issues of first impression for the board to consider. First, Stadium is requesting that the board permit it to offer interactive sports wagering before land-based retail sports wagering. Second, Stadium requests that the board permit it to conduct sports wagering operations at its Category 4 licensed facility under the same certificate as its Category 2 licensed facility. The Office of Enforcement Counsel believes that ruling on each issue is solely within the board's discretion based upon the board's interpretation of the Act. In order to give the board an alternative option in this regard, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed an answer, objection, and new matter on August 22, 2019. In regards to offering interactive and mobile sports wagering prior to having a land-based retail sports book, according to Section 13C 22.2 of the Act, no sports wagering certificate holder may operate or offer sports wagering until the board determines that the sports wagering certificate holder is prepared in all respects to offer sports wagering play to the public at a licensed facility. Stadium requests that the board today interpret the act in such a way that Stadium is prepared in all respects to offer sports wagering play at their licensed facility. Currently, the applicant's Category 2 licensed facility and the applicant's Category 4 licensed facility are active construction zones. The board has permitted a slot machine licensee to commence interactive sports wagering before land-based sports wagering. However, in that case, the test period for land-based sports wagering began 3 days after interactive sports wagering went live. Section 13C21B of the Act permits the board to authorize a sports wagering certificate holder to conduct sports wagering at a temporary facility that is physically connected to, attached to, or adjacent to a licensed facility for a period not to exceed 18 months. While the Office of Enforcement Counsel is of the opinion that such a temporary facility might meet the requirements of 13C22, it is important to remember that Stadium has not put forth any plans for a temporary facility and has testified today that they will not be opening a temporary facility. The second issue for which Stadium seeks the board's interpretation is the conduct of retail sports wagering operations at its Category 4 licensed facility under the same sports wagering certificate as its Category 2 licensed facility. Or if Stadium would have to pay a separate $10 million fee for sports wagering at its Category 4 licensed facility. The Office of Enforcement Counsel offers its arguments set forth in its August 22, 2019 answer, objection, and new matter as an alternative view from the petitioner. The Act is open for interpretation by the board in this regard. However, the Office of Enforcement Counsel respectfully requests that the board exercise its discretion consistently on whether to require a separate $10 million sports wagering certificate fee for a Category 4 licensed facility. A uniform interpretation by the board would create fairness and a balanced competitive field throughout the industry, in that a Category 4 facility that is proposed and operated by a Category 1 licensee is treated the same as a Category 4 facility that is owned and operated by a Category 2 licensee. If the board is inclined to grant all or part of Stadium Casino RE LLC's petition, OEC requests that the board do so pursuant to the conditions outlined in OEC's August 22, 2019 answer, objection, and new matter, and any other conditions which the board may wish to impose. Obviously, those recommended conditions that contradict the board's order as it relates to sports wagering operations at the Category 4 facility or the timing of launching sports wagering operations should be removed. Thank you, and we would be glad to answer any questions the board may have.
Thank you. Before I ask if anybody else has questions, I have the same question for both counsel. Mark, in your opinion, could a Cat 2 holder or a Cat 2 holder of a license who has a Cat 4, could they sell the Cat 4 to an independent person, independent party? Trying to make it a tight question.
Right. Well, I believe that there can be a change of control under Section 1328 of a Category 4 casino license. And that issue may come up in terms of going outside of the existing casino operators in Pennsylvania. Act 19 or Act 20 of 2019, which limits the parties that can bid on a Category 4.
On a new one.
On a new one. Could, I guess, be argued to say that, it could have some limitation on who the purchasers could be, but I would say that that is really focused on the bidding for the locations.
But an existing owner of a Cat 4 license, in your opinion, could, you may not be interested in doing so, could sell a Cat 4 to a third party.
Correct. And certainly, if that were to happen, I think the board, and it would be sold to an entity that has not already, acquired a certificate and paid the $10 million license. I don't see why that could not be a condition on the board's approval of the change of control.
That's fine.
And you might have a similar issue with a Cat 1, right, that would sell a Cat 4 and if they achieve their
I was
sports betting
making it
license.
simple.
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
making it simple by sticking with the Cat
Right.
2. OEC, you have an opinion on that subject?
I disagree. I don't think that you can independently sell a Cat 4 to an unlicensed, company that's not has license as a Cat 1, 2, or 3 within the Commonwealth. I think the Cat 4 is attached to the particular Cat 1, Cat 2, or Cat 3 license. So if you sell the Cat 4 without selling the Cat 1 to someone not licensed in this, in the Commonwealth, I would definitely object to it. I think the Cat 1 is tied, or the Cat 2 or the Cat 3 is tied to the Cat 4.
Okay, thank you.
Certainly, Mr. Chairman, if you did, if you did sell it to one, and I think they would have to pay for the slot machines, as is indicated under the existing section 1305.1.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. Okay, other questions from the board? We're all exhausted, are we? Okay. All right. We're gonna, we'll probably be considering this later, but I don't even know that. We're gonna take a break for a few minutes and then we'll return.
May we move our exhibits? and get
Please
record-
do, sir.
We would move the exhibits, stadium exhibits 1 through 4 into the record, please.
No objection.
Great, thank you. We'll be back in a few
Thank you,
minutes.
Georgia.
Sorry for the delay. We'll return to the record now. I'd like to consider a motion to have the minutes and transcript of the September 4th, 2019 meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the minutes and transcript of the September 4th, 2019 meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted. Kevin, there you are.
Good afternoon, Chairman Bear.
Now we're still.
Quite. Okay. So certainly initially on behalf of board staff, I would like to welcome Commissioner Smiler as a commissioner on the Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board. We look forward to working with you. For my executive director's report this morning, and in light of the fact that it is the second anniversary of Act 42 of 2017, I would like to give a brief overview of the implementation of expanded gambling in the Commonwealth. Yesterday, the 10th approved truck stop establishment opened its video gaming terminal room, offering 5 VGTs for play to the public. Although that was the most current initiative under Act 42 to be implemented, we are certainly moving forward at a very good pace in that regard to not only ensure that only eligible truck stops are given approval, but to also ensure that the VGT rooms are newly renovated areas, and the machines are brand new machines that do have a significant amount of aesthetic appeal. In addition to the VGT gambling, there currently are 12 sports books operating in Pennsylvania at 10 casino facilities and 2 off-track betting locations. Board staff has also implemented 5 online sports wagering platforms and 3 interactive gaming platforms. Moving forward in the short term, board staff anticipates over the next 3 to 6 weeks to implement additional online platforms, both in the areas of sports wagering and for interactive gaming activity. And we are anticipating the implementation of poker within those online gaming platforms. And with all of this new gambling options and gambling activity in Pennsylvania, it's certainly important to take note, as often as possible, the board's commitment to responsible gambling and to ensure that our oversight of this new activity provides options to persons who feel that they may be gambling too much or may be spending too much money. And one of those key options is to give patrons the ability to self-exclude themselves. We have initiated, as we've mentioned in the past, 3 new self-exclusion programs, one for interactive gaming, one for VGT gaming, and the third for fantasy contest activity. All 3 of these new self-exclusion programs are operational, and there have been 50 enrollments in these programs to date. 8 exclusions, self-exclusions for fantasy contests, 28 for interactive gaming, and 14 for VGT gaming. So with that, Chairman, I'll conclude my report for this morning. Thank you.
Morning, Chairman, members of the board. The Office of Human Resources has one motion for your consideration today relative to the hiring of one individual. Peter Charcello has been selected as a casino compliance representative for the Parks Casino. He has completed the interview process, background investigation, and drug screening, and is recommended for hire by Christopher Schroeder, Director of Casino Compliance, and Trevor Hassenbein, Senior Supervisor. Unless you have questions, I ask the board to consider a motion to hire Mr. Charcello as indicated.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the applicant for hire as proposed by the Human Resources Director.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted. Thanks, Danette.
Thank you.
David Wren, Office of Financial Management.
Morning, Chairman and board members. Today I'm here to present an accounting of board expenses for the first quarter ending September 30th. First quarter expenditures totaled $8.6 million. This was an increase of $163,000 or 1.9% over compared to the first quarter of last year. 89% of the expenditures were for payroll, which totaled $7.6 million for the quarter. Salaries, overtime, and leave payouts totaled $4.6 million, and benefits totaled $3.1 million. Payroll expenses were essentially flat from the prior year due to timing differences. Benefit expenses as a percentage of salaries decreased slightly to 68% from 69% of salary expenses. Operating and fixed asset expenses combined to total $924,000 or 11% of overall expenses. Expenditures increased by $155,000, and this was solely due to the timing of processing vendor invoices this year versus last year. The largest operating and fixed asset expenses were for services, which includes fingerprint fees and interagency billings at $345,000, rentals and leases at $335,000, and travel at $76,000. That concludes my remarks.
Thank you, Dave. Any questions, comments for Dave? Hearing none. Oh, no, we don't have a motion. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Getting ahead of myself. Morning, Doug.
Good morning, Chairman and members of the board. Our first agenda item relates to a regulation notice which Assistant Chief Counsel Chad Zimmerman is here to present.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the board. What's before you is a notice to rescind and amend published statements of policy, which has been assigned fiscal note number 125-227. The reason for this notice is that previously at a public hearing, the board adopted and promulgated regulation package number 125-206, which touched on various aspects of gaming regulations. Several of these aspects were previously adopted statements of policy that had been published in the Pennsylvania Bulletin. As those have now been incorporated into the regulations, they may be rescinded and deleted from the Pennsylvania Code. That is what this notice achieves. It also makes a minor modification to one other previously adopted statement of policy that was published to bring it into conformity with the Disposition of Abandoned and Unclaimed Property Act. So if there are any questions, I'm here to answer them. If not, I would request a motion to approve and adopt the notice, which will be sent to the Legislative Reference Bureau and budget for publishing.
Thanks, Chad. Are there any questions? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopts the notice number 125-227 permitting the deletion and modification of previous adopted statements of policy described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Thank you.
Next before the board are 5 petitions. One of the petitions was heard earlier today during the public hearing. The remaining of the 4 petitions will be decided based upon the documentary record. In each of the matters, the board has, in advance of this meeting, been provided with all documents of record and evidentiary materials. The first matter is the Stadium Casino's request for approval to conduct sports wagering. This is the matter heard just immediately prior to the start of our normal business. Should the board approve the request for sports wagering certificate, to be clear, it will not be authorizing the licensee to commence the operation of sports wagering immediately, but rather sports wagering will begin only after staff has reviewed all aspects of the sports wagering operation. And to be clear, whether that be for retail operations or separately for online sports wagering, the casino must also complete a successful test period for both types of operations. Additionally, as with all other prior sports wagering petitions the board has heard, the Office of Enforcement Counsel has requested a number of conditions that the casino and their operators will need to fulfill prior to commencing sports wagering. This matter is now ready for the board's consideration.
Thank you, Doug. Are there any questions or comments for counsel from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, subject to the conditions which will be outlined in the board's order, I move that the board grant Stadium Casino RE LLC's petition for a sports wagering certificate as it pertains to conducting sports wagering online prior to opening of a land-based casino in the operation of a land-based retail sports book at its Category 2 facility in Philadelphia. With respect to the petitioner's Category 4 facility, I move that the board defer a decision on that matter pending further deliberation by the board. Finally, I move that the parties' requests for confidentiality made in this matter be denied.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The next matter is Mountain View Thoroughbred Racing Association's petition for approval of a sports wagering shared service agreement. Mountain View is the Category 1 slot machine licensee and does business as Hollywood Casino at Penn National Racetrack. Mountain View was issued their sports wagering certificate in October 2018 and now requests that the board approve a shared service agreement between it and Penn Sports Interactive. Both Mountain View and Penn Sports Interactive are subsidiaries of Penn National Gaming Incorporated. Mountain View avers that the shared service agreement will leverage the existing infrastructure and operations of each Penn subsidiary and will allow Mountain View to have access to the expertise and capabilities of Penn's interactive gaming division. The Office of Enforcement Counsel has no objection to the relief, subject to conditions outlined in their answer. And additionally, OEC has no objection to the request for confidentiality. This matter is now ready for the board's consideration.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant Mountain View Thoroughbred Racing Association, LLC's petition for a sports wagering shared services agreement as described by the Office of Chief Counsel. I further move that the request for confidentiality made in this matter be granted.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The next petition before the board today is the joint request from Excel Entertainment Gaming, LLC, Excel Entertainment, Inc., and TPG Pace Holdings Corporation. The petition seeks board approval to change the ownership of Excel Entertainment Gaming, PA. By way of background, in May of 2019, Excel Entertainment Gaming, PA, a wholly owned subsidiary of Excel Entertainment, Inc., was issued a conditional terminal operator license to operate video gaming terminals in the Commonwealth. Texas Pacific Group, a global investment company with 17 offices in 9 countries, through a previously created holding company, TPGH, has now entered into an agreement with the shareholders of Excel Entertainment, Inc., to effectuate the public listing of Excel through it. While the Act contemplates a new $5,000 licensing fee be paid when a change of ownership occurs, Section 3517D of the Act allows the board to reduce the amount to be paid. This is the first change of control of a terminal operator to come before the board. However, for changes of ownership of slot machine licensees, the board has recently charged a reduced license fee equal to 7.5% of the original license fee. The Office of Enforcement Counsel has no objection to the request for change of ownership, subject to several conditions set forth in their answer, and those conditions are primarily related to licensing requirements and the provision of transactional documents. And with that explanation, the matter is now ready for the board's consideration.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant Excel Entertainment Gaming, PA, LLC, Excel Entertainment, Inc., and TPG Pace Holding Corporation's joint petition for approval of a change of ownership or control of a terminal operator conditional licensee as described by the Office of Chief Counsel. I further move that a $375 change of control fee be imposed.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Next before the board is Mustafa Whitfield's petition to be removed from the board's involuntary exclusion list. On January 11th, 2016, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a petition to place Mr. Whitfield on the exclusion list after being notified that he was criminally charged with stealing purses from patrons in Harrah's parking garage on 2 separate occasions. Mr. Whitfield, who was incarcerated at the time of OEC's filing, was served a copy of the petition while he was incarcerated. Mr. Whitfield contacted OEC in February 2016 requesting copies of the surveillance footage and reports associated with the petition. And at that time, he was informed that the board would hold a hearing in the matter following his release from prison. In September 2016, Mr. Whitfield contacted the Office of Hearings and Appeals, indicating that he no longer wanted a hearing. On September 21st of 2016, all charges against Mr. Whitfield were dropped. However, he never responded to OEC's petition, thereby resulting in, in the admission of all facts alleged within the petition, and the board placed Mr. Whitfield on the exclusion list in November of 2016. OEC has no objection to Mr. Whitfield's current request to be removed from the list, since all of the criminal charges have been null-prossed and expunged. However, since Mr. Whitfield has not contested the facts in the case, and therefore the facts are deemed admitted under regulation, it's within the board's discretion to grant or deny his request.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant Mustafa Whitfield's petition for removal from the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Is there a second?
With great reluctance and reservation, I will second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The final petition before the board today is George Brown III's request to lift the suspension of his gaming employee occupation permit. Mr. Brown was employed as a table game dealer at Parks Casino, and in May of this year, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a request for an emergency order of suspension after receiving notice that Mr. Brown had been charged in 5 different cases with crimes involving numerous assault-related offenses, 4 of which were felonies. Each case listed was on the same date and at the same location, and it appears as though he was involved in a large fight involving multiple people. The emergency order suspending Mr. Brown's permit was signed by the executive director on May 21st of this year. A hearing was held, and in August of 2019, the board issued an order directing that the suspension remain in effect. In September of 2019, Mr. Brown filed a petition to lift the suspension of his permit, indicating that he did not commit the crimes he was charged with. He was protecting a friend from being attacked, and that in fact the charges had been withdrawn for insufficient evidence. OEC has no objection to the request, and that's the matter now before the board.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant George Brown III's petition to lift the suspension of his gaming employee occupation permit as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Next, presenting withdrawals and surrenders as well as reports and recommendations is Deputy Chief Counsel Steve Cook.
Morning. The board has received several unopposed petitions to withdraw the applications or surrender the credentials of the following individuals and businesses: Snyder's Gateway, Inc., John R. Bittner, James Bittner, Alice Bittner, Michael Miller, John M. Bittner, Steve Bittner, the L. Frank Bittner Article 3 QSST Trust for the benefit of Alice Bittner, Mark J. Rowan, Mindy Miller, C. Win Technology, LLC, Matthew Brown, Sandra Danielle Beaver, Patty S. Hart, Fleming Peterson, and Klaus Winberg. The Office of Enforcement Counsel has no objections to any of these withdrawals. As a result, if the board grants them, they'd be doing so without prejudice to each of these persons or entities.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue order to approve the withdrawals and surrenders as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next before the board for consideration are 5 reports and recommendations received from the Office of Hearings and Appeals. I would note at the outset that there are actually 6 listed on the agenda, but the individual identified as FM, who petitioned for removal from the voluntary self-exclusion list, contacted me this morning and asked that the matter be deferred until November so he can appear to briefly address the board. So we'll accommodate him and pass over that today. So we will proceed with 5 reports and recommendations. These reports and recommendations, along with the complete evidentiary record for each proceeding, have been provided to the board in advance of each meeting, of this meeting. And additionally, as I just indicated with respect to FM, each of these individuals have been notified that the board would be taking the matter up today. And if they wanted to briefly address the board, they should come forward when the matter is called. Jiffy Mart, Inc. is the first report and recommendation before the board today. Jiffy Mini Mart is located in Shippenville, PA. In May of 2018, it filed an application for a video gaming terminal establishment license. The board granted Jiffy Mini Mart and its principals conditional licensure in August of 2018 while a more thorough investigation was undertaken. On February 13th of 2019, the Office of Enforcement Counsel sent a notice of recommendation of denial to Jiffy Mini Mart, stating that it did not meet the statutory definition of a truck stop establishment because it did not average more than 50,000 gallons of diesel fuel or biodiesel fuel sales each month in the previous 12 months and did not provide sufficient evidence at that time to show projections that it would exceed that threshold in the upcoming 12 months. Sales of 50,000 gallons per month is required in order to be eligible to have a video gaming terminal license at the facility. On February 22nd, 2019, Jiffy Mini Mart requested a hearing. Thereafter, Commonwealth Gaming, LLC, a video gaming terminal operator that Jiffy Mini Mart contracted with to operate their VGTs, filed a petition to intervene, which was granted. A hearing in this matter was held on May 9th, 2019, and during that hearing, Jiffy Mini Mart presented testimony from the majority owner of the Mini Mart, Perjury April Gill, and from Robert Terrell, an expert witness that conducts site feasibility studies for gas stations and grocery stores. Mr. Gill, the owner, testified as to his efforts to grow the Mini Mart and increase sales. He stated he's invested significantly in the business and has plans to increase future sales with the installation of a large LED price display sign visible on Interstate 80, by adding brand name fast food restaurant, by arranging to accept credit cards used by trucking companies, and by adding a diesel exhaust fluid dispensers to his diesel pumps. Mr. Gill stated that during 2018, his sales of diesel averaged 38,476 gallons, but he believes his plans will increase this figure to more than 50,000 gallons each month. Mr. Terrell, the expert witness retained in this case by Jiffy Mini Mart, confirmed performed a site feasibility study, which included suggestions to assist in increasing diesel fuel sales. These suggestions were largely consistent with Mr. Gill's testimony, and Mr. Terrell also testified that the implementation of his recommendations would increase the Mini Mart's diesel fuel sales to at least 53,000 gallons per month soon after implementation, with an expected increase to reach 125,000 gallons per month within 1 year. This matter is now ready for the board's consideration. I would note for the record that Jiffy Mart's counsel, Mr. Deal, is present. I presume he'd like to address the board.
Yes, may it please the board, chairman, members of the board, respect to my colleagues at OEC and Chief Counsel's office.
Could you lean into the mic or push the mic towards you?
I'll certainly do so. My name is Tom Deal, D-I-E-H-L, and as indicated, I'm here on behalf of Jiffy Mini Mart and Commonwealth Gaming. As a threshold matter, Mr. Gill regrets that he was unable to be here. He had a family, he intended to be here, but had a family member, a family issue with his daughter in Virginia. And despite the Herculean efforts of the PGCB staff and Rich McGarvey, we just couldn't pull together the ability to have him participate by video conference. That said, I'm going to say a few words on Mr. Gill's behalf. The issue has been framed here, I think, appropriately and accurately by Counsel Cook. It's narrow. The Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board's OEC and Jiffy Mini Mart agree on the vast majority of the issues. Every element in the definition of a truck stop has been met, except for the one issue that is now contested, and that is whether or not the projections for the gallonage of diesel sales will meet the 50,000 threshold. So in that regard, This is a real-world truck stop. And when you think in capacity, think in terms of what a truck stop looks like. That's what Mr. Gill's business looks like. It has islands. It has patrons who are truckers. It has been in that regard for years. Moreover, Mr. Gill is a real-world owner. This is a family-owned truck stop. This is a minority family-owned truck stop. His wife owns 5% of it, but she will assure you that she does more than 5% of the work. Mr. Gill is not a corporate conglomerate, is not a publicly traded company. When he started his business, he started with one station. He now owns 5. This facility that we're talking about here today, when he remodeled it, it was a service station that he converted into a truck stop in 2015. It sold 0 gallons of diesel fuel. He sold the first gallon of diesel fuel at this establishment. So if you're seeing a pattern with Mr. Gill, he starts small, he thinks big, and he works his shop every day in between. In the hearing that we had earlier in May of this year, Councilor Cook made reference to expert testimony that was put forth by Jiffy Mini Mart in the form of Robert Terrell's testimony. We submit that technically there was 2 experts. We had the expert opinion of Mr. Gill, who has ran truck stops from start to finish. And then there was the expert testimony of Mr. Terrell. That is an expert in the conventional sense. This is someone that is an expert in the industry that you would hire to come in and render an opinion. And just as an aside, Mr. Terrell has rendered feasibility studies for 26 years. He's rendered hundreds of them on behalf of convenience stores that sell fuel, with truck stops with national brands such as Pilot, Turkey Hill, and Kroger's. If he's not an expert in the issue of fuel projections, there is not an expert. That said, he provided unrebutted evidence during that hearing, as did Mr. Gill. But Mr. Terrell indicated several improvements that Mr. Cook had referred to, such as a large sign, a sign that you'd be able to see from the highway, partnering with a branded restaurant, such as a Subway, accepting fleet cards that are nationally acceptable, the main ones, sort of by analogy, the Visa and MasterCards of truck driving for fuel sales. Mr. Gill is a guy that gets things done. And my favorite part of that proceeding was the one that I had the least amount of control over. At one point, Mr. Gill reaches into his pocket and he holds up his phone because he wants the hearing officer to see the 60-foot, a rendering of the 60-foot sign that he wants to put on that you will be able to see from the highway. And again, it was a bit of a mess for counsel involved because we had evidentiary issues and that type of thing, but Mr. Gill wanted to make a point that he was serious about what he was doing moving forward. That was in May. Today, there is a 60-foot LED sign in front of his property that he's put there at the personal expense of $95,000 to himself. Again, that is not $95,000 to a publicly traded company. That is to an individual and to a family business. But that is the level of commitment that Mr. Gill has to this project, to his wife, and to his 26 employees. And just as a quick aside, we made reference, it was in Shippensville, Pennsylvania. By the 2017 census, Shippensville, Pennsylvania, was 451 people. So when you're employing 26 people in that area, not necessarily at that shop, but across his 5 stores, that's not an insignificant employer in the area. But at any rate, with respect to the other amenities that he wanted to add, he's accepted on major fleet cards at this point. The sign is performing as consistent with Mr. Terrell's testimony. It has increased his sales. He has not implemented yet the Subway. He's still in negotiations with them Again, he's got to divide his time because he's the owner and operator of 5 different locations. So it does take time to bring those type of things to bear. That said, let me conclude with this. The General Assembly likewise put forth a sign, almost as conspicuous as the 60-foot one that Mr. Gill has in front of his place. I would submit that sign was when they put projections in the language of the statute. That's kind of unusual, and that should surprise you. If you go through the 1,000+ pages of statute and regulations, we don't see projections that frequently. Okay, we typically see specific numbers enumerated. Projections in this case, I submit, were not put in there for the Flying J. They're not put in there for Pilot. They're not put in for Goliath. The projections were put in for David. They were put in for the small guys, the Mr. Gills, the guys that start small, they plan big, and they work their shop every single day in between. And one of the amenities that I did not mention, which is, I think, the elephant in the room, it's why we're here, is the VGTs, okay? Mr. Terrell, in his unrebutted evidence during the hearing, said that one amenity alone, in his estimation, his expertise, would put Mr. Gill over the top with respect to the 50,000 gallon threshold. Mr. Gill is the type of man that can take an image from his cell phone and turn it into a 60-foot reality in front of his place. But he cannot, without your help and without your aid, put a terminal in his property. You heard in a public hearing earlier today where a Category 2/Category 4 applicant said they baked into their application and in their financial considerations certain expectations on how they interpreted the regs, okay? Mr. Gill's no different. His expectation was that part of his projections would include VLTs. So the only thing that we would ask today is when you make your determination, we would request that you would extend the same shot, the same advantage to Mr. Gill that the General Assembly intended to him, that give him the opportunity to have a seat at the table with the expansion of gaming such that he can use that in his projections as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. OEC has a brief statement. The Office of Enforcement Counsel respectfully requests that the board should interpret the Video Gaming Act in a way that places heavier weight on the actual fuel sold by a truck stop establishment rather than on projections. The Office of Enforcement Counsel is of the opinion that these projections should be considered when the applicant does not yet have a full 12 months of diesel or biodiesel fuel sales for the board to rely upon. That is not the case today. Jiffy Mini Mart has been operating for several years, and both the 12 months applying for its VGT truck stop establishment license and the 12 months before that, they did not come close to meeting the requirement that they sell an average of 50,000 gallons of diesel or biodiesel per month over a 12-month period. Despite the projections which they provided, between when they applied for a truck stop establishment license and when the evidentiary record closed in this matter, Jiffy Mini Mart did not sell an average of 50,000 gallons of diesel or biodiesel per month within a 12-month period. If the board were to place great weight on projections from an applicant that has a history of operations and a history of not selling the requisite amount of diesel or biodiesel fuel, the Office of Enforcement Counsel believes that it would create a great deal of uncertainty in the VGT industry and allow applicants to pull projected fuel sales out of thin air when actual fuel sales fall below the statutory minimum. In such instances, it is highly likely that the Office of Enforcement Counsel would be back before the board seeking to revoke or suspend the license when the establishment does not meet their projection to sell an average of 50,000 gallons of diesel or biodiesel fuel per month, thereby creating a nightmarish situation of musical chairs for the gaming industry, the Commonwealth, and the Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board. If the board wishes to place great weight on future diesel sales or biodiesel fuel sales from establishments who have a history of operations and sales, the Office of Enforcement Counsel respectfully requests that the board interpret the term projection consistent with our position as outlined in the extensive filings and record in this matter. That is, the projections need to articulate with specificity each method the applicant will use to increase fuel sales and an approximate amount of each method in which fuel sales will increase. For these reasons, as well as the reasons set forth in the record before the Board, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the Board deny Jiffy Mini Mart's application for an establishment license. However, if the Board does not wish to deny Jiffy Mini Mart's application, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the Board extend Jiffy Mini Mart's conditional license in order to determine if they will sell an average of 50,000 gallons of diesel or biodiesel fuel per month during that time. Thank you, and we'd be glad to answer your questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for council? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board reject the requested denial of Jiffy Mini Mart, Inc.'s video gaming terminal license application, conditioned on substantial compliance with the recommendation of petitioner's expert witness, as will be outlined by the board's order.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The next matter to be heard by the board is the report and recommendation regarding Thaddeus Marshall. In March of 2018, Mr. Marshall was issued a gaming employee occupation permit and was employed as a table games dealer at the Hollywood Casino at Penn National Racecourse. On August 8, 2019, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a request for an emergency suspension of Mr. Marshall's gaming employee occupation permit after receiving notice that he'd been charged with conspiracy to commit theft by deception and conspiracy to commit access device fraud. Specifically, it is alleged that Mr. Marshall and his mother stole and used a credit card belonging to his grandmother, making purchases and withdrawals totaling over $17,000. As a result of these charges and OEC's request, the board's executive director issued an emergency order suspending Mr. Marshall's gaming permit. A hearing in this matter was held on August 28th of 2019. OEC appeared, offering testimony and documentary evidence into the record supporting the criminal charges. Mr. Marshall appeared at the hearing, testifying only that he had been misinformed, or that he had been informed that the charges were eventually going to be reduced from felonies to misdemeanors. He did not discuss at all the factual allegations that led to the criminal charges. And as of this date, the charges pending against him remain felonies, and as a result, the report and recommendation issued recommends the suspension remain in place.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals regarding the suspension of Thaddeus Marshall's gaming employee occupation permit as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Passing over the FM report and recommendation, as I indicated earlier, the next two reports and recommendations both pertain to requests for removal.
Steve, could you just hold for a second? Doug, I need to talk to you for a second.
I know, I read it again.
Sorry about that. Please continue, Steve.
The next two reports and recommendations pertain to requests for removal from the board's self-exclusion list. Both of these requests come from individuals who chose the lifetime self-exclusion option. I would note for the record that the board has started the process of amending its regulations to allow for a petition process whereby a person who chooses a lifetime self-exclusion can petition for removal from the list after 10 years has passed since their placement on the list, as long as certain conditions were met. This regulation is not yet finally promulgated, and in any event, neither of these next two cases I'm going to summarize would reach that 10-year threshold. So the first of those two reports and recommendations pertains to JP's request for removal from the board's voluntary exclusion list. As a result of this request, a hearing was held before the board's Office of Hearings and Appeals on August 1st, 2019. The Office of Enforcement Counsel appeared at the hearing, offering testimony and documentary evidence. JP appeared at the hearing as well and testified on his own behalf. The evidence presented at the hearing established that on June 11, 2015, JP entered the Mohegan Sun at Pocono Downs Casino and requested to be placed on the self-exclusion list. The casino compliance representative, or CCR, who placed JP on the list, testified that he conducted the mandatory interview, explained the process of being placed on the list, the consequences of the 3 exclusion period options being 1 year, 5 years, or lifetime, and he completed all the required paperwork and procedures. Thereafter, JP signed the acknowledgement form selecting a lifetime self-exclusion. At the hearing, JP testified that he placed himself on the list because his wife threatened to leave him and seek alimony if he did not place himself on the list for a lifetime period. He further testified that he told the CCR that his wife had threatened him in this matter. Upon examination, however, the CCR indicated that that was never told to him, and if it was, he would have stopped the process out of concern that the person was being coerced. Ultimately, the report and recommendation issued in this hearing found that JP is not eligible for removal from the lifetime self-exclusion list, and that is the recommendation before the board.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals regarding JP's petition for removal from the PGCB voluntary self-exclusion list as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The next matter before the board pertains to MK's request to be removed from the lifetime self-exclusion list pursuant to the findings of fact in the report and recommendation issued in this matter on February 11, 2016. MK entered the Hollywood Casino Penn National Race Course and requested to be placed on the self-exclusion list. The casino compliance representative on duty placed MK on the list after following all the required protocols and procedures. Thereafter, MK signed an acknowledgement form selecting the lifetime self-exclusion period. On March 26th of 2019, approximately 3 years later, MK filed a request for removal from the self-exclusion list. The Office of Enforcement Counsel objected, and a hearing was held on July 25th, 2019. OEC once again appeared, presenting evidence about the process leading to MK's placement on the list. MK appeared and testified on his own behalf, testifying that he has impulsivity issues, attends therapy, and takes medication with his impulsiveness. He stated that he was not taking his medication at the time he placed himself on the list and that it was an impulsive decision. He did not believe, however, that his impulsiveness issues would impact him negatively if he were allowed to continue gaming. The report and recommendation issued subsequent to the hearing found that MK is not eligible from the list under the board's present regulations, and that is the recommendation to the board.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, is there a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals regarding MK's petition for removal from the PGCB voluntary self-exclusion list as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Fran Zoo's matter is the final report and recommendation before the board today. In January of 2019, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a petition requesting that Mr. Zoo be placed on the board's involuntary exclusion list, alleging that in May of 2018, he cheated while gaming at the Meadows Casino. Specifically, while playing mini baccarat, he posted a $25 wager and a $300 wager. As a result of that conduct, Mr. Zoo was permanently evicted from the Meadows. He was later charged with gaming-related offenses, and those charges remain pending. Additionally, it was determined at the hearing that this was Mr. Zoo's second incident of cheating at a Pennsylvania casino, and he previously received a warning letter from the Office of Enforcement Counsel after an incident in 2015 at the Mohegan Sun Casino at Pocono Downs. A hearing was held on August 7, 2019. OEC appeared offering evidence. Despite receiving proper notice, Mr. Zoo did not appear at the hearing and as a result presented no evidence. Based on the evidence that was presented, the hearing officer recommended that Mr. Zoo be placed on the involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopts the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearing and Appeals regarding the placement of Fran Zoo on the PGCB involuntary exclusion list described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
And that concludes the matters of the Office of Chief Counsel.
Thank you. Hi, Sue.
Thank you, Chairman Barish and members of the board. Before the board today will be 2 video gaming terminal operator licenses, 6 video gaming terminal establishment licenses, 1 video gaming terminal procurement agent license, and 1 conditional sports wagering operator license. In addition, there will be 1,067 principal key qualifier and gaming and non-gaming employees. Finally, there will be the consideration of 7 gaming service provider qualifications. The first matters before you are VGT operator licenses for Commonwealth Gaming LLC, doing business as Commonwealth Gaming, and J&J Venture Gaming of Pennsylvania LLC, doing business as J&J Venture Gaming PA. A VGT operator owns, services, or maintains VGTs for placement and operation at truck stops. Both Commonwealth Gaming and J&J Venture Gaming PA were previously issued conditional VGT licenses. The Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement has completed its investigations of both companies, and the Bureau of Licensing has provided you with background, investigation, and suitability reports. I have provided the board with draft orders and ask that you consider first the order to license Commonwealth Gaming LLC, doing business as Commonwealth Gaming.
Enforcement Counsel has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the video gaming terminal operator license for Commonwealth Gaming LLC, doing business as Commonwealth Gaming as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Next is J&J Venture Gaming of Pennsylvania LLC, doing business as J&J Venture Gaming PA.
Enforcement Counsel has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the video gaming terminal operator license for J&J Venture Gaming of Pennsylvania LLC, doing business as J&J Venture Gaming PA, as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor? All opposed? Motion's adopted.
In addition, we have consideration of VGT establishment licenses for 6 establishment entities. VGT establishments are truck stops seeking to place VGTs in their businesses. Each of these applicants has been conditionally licensed. The Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement has completed its investigations, including evaluation that the applicants meet the VGT establishment eligibility criteria. The Bureau of Licensing has provided you with background investigation and suitability reports. Once fully licensed, establishments can continue forward toward completing the steps necessary to commence VGT gaming. I have provided you with draft orders and ask that you consider the orders to license first CHR Corporation, doing business as Rudders Store 16, which is located at 362 North Main Street in York County.
Enforcement Counsel has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the video gaming terminal establishment license for CHR Corp. doing business as Rudders Store number 16 as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next are 2 Sandwho's Inc. entities doing business as First Liberty Exxon, located at 8489 Route 414 Liberty, and second Lawrenceville Exxon, located at 13305 Highway 49 in Lawrenceville.
Enforcement Counsel has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board grant the video gaming terminal establishment licenses for Sandwho's Inc. doing business as Liberty Exxon and Lawrenceville Exxon as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Next, there are United Refining Company of Pennsylvania doing business as Quickfill entities. The entities are Quickfill number 226, located at 73 Rolling Stone Road, Cuylerville, Quickfill 200, located at 1001 East Spring Street in Titusville, and Quickfill 229, located at 5574 PA 8, Harrisville.
Enforcement Counsel has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the video gaming terminal establishment licenses for United Refining Company of Pennsylvania, doing business as Quickfill number 226, quick fill number 200, and quick fill 229 as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The next matter for your consideration is a license for VGT procurement agent applicant Commonwealth America LLC. Commonwealth America LLC is currently conditionally licensed. A procurement agent negotiates terminal placement agreements on behalf of a VGT terminal operator for placement of VGTs in truck stop establishments. The Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement has completed its investigation, and the Bureau of Licensing has provided you with a background investigation and suitability report. I have provided you with a draft order and ask that you consider the order to license Commonwealth America LLC as a procurement agent.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grants Commonwealth America LLC VGT procurement agent license as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Also for your consideration is a conditional sports wagering operator license for Crown PA Gaming, Inc., doing business as DraftKings. Crown PA Gaming, Inc. is a Boston, Massachusetts-based company that proposes to operate sports wagering on behalf of at least one sports wagering certificate holder. The board may issue a conditional sports wagering operator license provided the applicant has submitted a completed application, agrees to pay the licensing fee prior to license issuance, and the Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement does not object to the license. The applicant satisfies these criteria. I ask that the board consider the order to conditionally license Crown PA Gaming, Inc., doing business as DraftKings, as a sports wagering operator.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the conditional sports wagering license for Crown PA Gaming, Inc., doing business as DraftKings, as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Next are one-year license extensions for a conditionally licensed sports wagering operator and a conditionally licensed VGT establishment. The companies were each granted a one-year conditional license approximately 1 year ago. Under the Gaming Act and board regulations, the board is authorized to extend the licenses for an additional 1 year for good cause. In each case, the background investigation and suitability report process for the companies is continuing. I ask that the board grant one-year extensions to the following companies. First, American Wagering, Inc., which is conditionally licensed as a sports wagering operator.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the extension for conditional licenses as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
And next is Pipeline Petroleum, Inc., which is conditionally licensed as a VGT establishment.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the principal and key employee licenses and a gaming.
I think that's the wrong, I think we should have.
Yep, they should have both been rolled
Should have been
into
in
one
one
motion.
motion.
Yeah. They were.
Oh,
You did it already. So,
well, we didn't,
where are we?
we voted before she made
We
them.
voted before we named both, so it's the same motion. Why don't we do it again? And this motion will include American Wagering, Inc. and Pipeline Petroleum, Inc.
Okay.
for one-year extensions.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the extension for conditional licenses as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Fine.
Second.
Your second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Also for your consideration are principals, a key employee, and a gaming service provider qualifier. Prior to this meeting, the Bureau of Licensing provided you with a proposed order for 2 principals, 1 key employee, and 1 gaming service provider qualifier. I ask that the board consider the order approving the licenses and qualification.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
I move that the board grant the principal and key employee licenses and a gaming service provider qualification as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
There are also temporary licenses for your consideration. Prior to this meeting, the Bureau of Licensing provided you with an order regarding the issuance of temporary licenses for 3 principal and 19 key employees. I ask that the board consider the order approving the licenses.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the temporary principal and key employee credentials as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Additionally, there are gaming permits and non-gaming registrations. Prior to this meeting, the Bureau of Licensing provided you with a list of 793 individuals to whom the Bureau has granted temporary or full occupation permits, and 201 individuals to whom the Bureau has granted registrations under the authority delegated to the Bureau of Licensing. I ask that the Board consider a motion approving the order.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the gaming employee occupation permits and non-gaming employee registrations as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Is there
Second.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's fine. Go ahead. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
There are also recommendations of denial for 2 gaming employee applicants. The applicants were notified that they were being recommended for denial and failed to request a hearing within the specified timeframes. The Bureau of Licensing has provided you with orders addressing each of the applicants who the Office of Enforcement Counsel has recommended for denial. I ask that the Board consider the orders approving the denials.
Enforcement Council continues to request denial in each instance.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board denies the gaming employee occupation permit applicants as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next for your consideration are withdrawal requests. In each case, the license permit or registration is no longer required. For today's meeting, I have provided the Board with a list of 4 key employees, 29 gaming employees, and 5 non-gaming employees. I ask that the Board consider the orders approving the list of withdrawals.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the withdrawal of key gaming and non-gaming employee applications, excuse me, as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor? All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Finally, for your consideration are gaming service provider registrations. The Bureau of Licensing provided you with an order and an attached list of 7 registered gaming service provider applicants. I ask that the Board consider the order registering these gaming service providers.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Board approve the gaming service provider registration applications as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
That concludes the matters of the Bureau of Licensing.
Thank you, Sue.
The Office of Enforcement Counsel will present 12 matters today for the board's consideration, in which we will request the board's approval of 2 consent agreements, 2 revocations, 2 suspensions, and 6 involuntary exclusions. The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is a consent agreement between the Office of Enforcement Counsel and Category 1 licensee Downs Racing, LP, doing business as Mohegan Sun Pocono. The consent agreement will be presented by Assistant Enforcement Counsel John Crow. Representatives from Mohegan Sun are present, and at this time I request that those individuals introduce themselves for the record and be sworn.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Christopher Soriano, S-O-R-I-A-N-O, with Dwayne Morris, LLP, Counsel of Downs Racing.
Good afternoon, Tony Colucci, GM at Pocono Downs, C-A-R-L-U-C-C-I.
Good afternoon, Ron Kershon, C-H-R-Z-A-N, Director of Compliance, Mohegan Sun Pocono.
I'm Donald Karpensky, K-A-R-P-E-N-S-K-E, Director of Surveillance.
Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the board. John Crow, C-R-O-H-E, for the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is a consent agreement reached between Mohegan Sun Pocono and the Office of Enforcement Counsel regarding underage gaming violations. First, on June 23rd, 2018, an underage individual who was 17 years of age at the time of this incident entered the facility without being stopped or asked to provide identification and was on the gaming floor for approximately 10 minutes and gamed at 1 slot machine. The underage individual was permanently banned from the facility. Next, on October 20th, 2018, an underage individual who was 18 years of age at the time of this incident entered the facility with what was later discovered to be a false identification card, was on the gaming floor for approximately 1 hour, gamed at 7 slot machines, and utilized a ticket redemption unit. The underage individual was permanently banned from the facility. Next, on January 11th, 2019, an underage individual who was 19 years of age at the time of this incident entered the facility without being stopped or asked to provide identification, was on the gaming floor for approximately 1 hour, and gamed at 1 electronic table game. The underage individual was permanently banned from the facility. Finally, between December 30th, 2018 and January 5th, 2019, an underage individual accessed the gaming floor with what was later discovered to be the legitimate identification of another individual, gamed and was served alcohol numerous times during that 7-day period. On the 7 different dates that the underage individual was permitted to access the gaming floor at Mohegan Sun Pocono, the underage individual spent a total of 52 hours and 5 minutes on the gaming floor, played 2 table games, played 194 slot machines, was served 11 alcoholic beverages, conducted 8 cage transactions, and was issued 3 Players Club cards. The underage individual was also permanently banned from the facility. The Office of Enforcement Council and Mohegan Sun Pocono respectfully request that the board approve the consent agreement and stipulations of settlement that Mohegan Sun Pocono pay a civil penalty of $110,000 as well as a $2,500 administration fee for costs incurred by the board staff in connection with investigations into this matter.
Good afternoon again, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. On behalf of Downs Racing accepts the findings set forth in the stipulation of settlement and accepts and requests that the board approve the consent agreement, including the stipulated fine. The witnesses who are with me will provide some brief background to the board on the incidents and more specifically on some lessons learned and some improvements that have been implemented to try to avoid circumstances like this from happening in the future. With respect to the first 3 instances identified by the Office of Enforcement Council, those are situations where errors were made on the part of staff. Procedures are in place to identify underage gamblers. Obviously, it's something that's taken incredibly seriously. Investigation has revealed that steps could have been taken by personnel who were on duty, and those steps were not taken, and Mr. Cruzan will talk about how that's been addressed. The 4th instance that was mentioned by the Office of Enforcement Council as the subject of the settlement is a bit more complex of a matter in that this was a person who presented a legitimate identification of a person who, in the view of the security personnel who took a look at it, looked very similar in terms of appearance. It's a bit harder of a problem to solve. And occasionally something like this could happen. Mr. Carlucci will give you, though, some feedback on what exactly has been implemented in terms of some strategies to try to combat this problem from happening again. But this is, I would suspect, slightly more difficult problem when people look alike. But that said, we take this matter very, very seriously and are here to again, admit responsibility, accept responsibility, not make excuses, but the witnesses will provide the board with some feedback on steps that are being taken in the future.
Thank you.
Mr. Carlucci?
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Commissioner Smiler, welcome.
Thank you.
Wish it was better circumstances, of course. But, the first 3 occurrences, obviously, employees have failed to do what they're supposed to do. So we're putting them through retraining. Ron will talk about the appropriate form of discipline that we issue. The 4th one, as Chris mentioned, we're not making excuses. We have to go forward and figure out how we're going to fix this. But 31 different employees carded this particular minor, and 31 different employees felt that she looked enough like that person on that ID that they let the person through. Looking at it myself, as we all know, honestly, my Pennsylvania license was 3 years ago, and I'd love to say I'm thinner, but I'm not. Okay, I'm a little heavier, and I have a lot more gray hair since taking this position. So there's going to be times that they don't look exactly like, but 31 different employees looked at that through training, and we've done that, right, and felt that this employee should go on the floor or game. I'm sorry.
Enforcement Council, how are they supposed to, how are they supposed to distinguish these two? I see the identification card, the hair is parted on the same side.
eyes are blue in one, in the fake.
What color eyes do I have?
From here, brown or hazel, but if you were standing up next to me, I could look at them and tell you for sure, for certain. The eyes are brown or hazel in the individual who was underage. She also has fuller lips than the individual in the photo. She also has an oval face, thinner hair. There are questions that they could have asked the individual to see the way that she was discovered. When they asked her a question, she couldn't answer a question that was similar to answer the question that matched what was on the identification. So if I'm a security guard at a stanchion post and my sole job is to question whether or not somebody is underage, I'm paying particular attention to the identification, the eye color of the individual. They're 3 inches in height different. So there are several things that they could have questioned this individual about just on site. We took it into consideration. That's why the fine is as low as it is. I personally believe if they didn't look alike, it'd be higher. We've had individuals that have looked alike. We've had sisters that use the same identification 2 years apart. We never find the casinos in those instances because we see the similarities in the identification that was presented and the individual who was caught. So we look at that to determine whether or not those individuals match the identification. In this case, in my opinion, it's pretty straightforward.
Hindsight's, no pun intended, always 20/20.
And I do want to stress, I'm not here to argue the consent. I'm accepting responsibility. I just wanted to get clarification on that.
Okay.
Because again, we have to move forward. It's responsibility. We understand the responsibility of the state and our casino. And Cyrus is actually right. What we did to say strengthen our staff, being that this happened, is that we started asking questions. Now, we started with people 25 and that looked 25 and under. In all honesty, because if we caught it, like if we start asking questions to everybody, we're going to lose, the state's going to lose revenue, we're going to lose business. So we're looking at 25 as the age to start.
Just to make sure, I know what you're saying, but for the public record, you're going to lose business because it'll slow down people coming into the casino.
Okay.
You don't want to leave that just hanging out there.
I apologize.
I
Mr.
understood
Chairman.
what you're trying to say.
No, but yeah, I just think, again, we have to start somewhere, and obviously with our successes. And we're doing the questions that we're asking, because Wilkesboro, Pennsylvania is not a gigantic place, and there's a lot of colleges around, and the word will get out that we're asking these questions, and what they'll start doing is start telling people different things. So we're changing the questions up as well. We're asking questions like we're going to get into things that says questions of the month, questions of the week. What is your zodiac sign? You should be able to answer that like that, but not everyone can. Where do you live? But a lot of our team members also know these addresses. So they may say, what's the name of that pizzeria that's right down the street from your house? We're trying to get as unique as possible because, Mr. Chairman, it's a challenge. I just being very frank. Looking at eye color real quick, Cyrus is absolutely right, not here to contend that. But, things change. People put contacts in their eyes that are different colors. Again, hair colors change for everybody, again. So we're trying to be as, as diligent as possible in doing this.
If I could, I looked at this and I hear everything you're saying. What do I know? Noticing whether somebody has heels on or not might have solved the 3 or 4 inches difference in height. I don't know what you're doing about that, because to me that's the one that's kind of hard to get around.
Right.
And I don't know what in your training you do to try to figure out how tall somebody is.
Not yet, but we'll have to get there. Because actually, to be honest, full disclosure, I didn't, until Cyrus said that, I wasn't one of the ones I was thinking of. It was after this happened, we got together, and we didn't, again, no excuses. What can we do? What do we need to do here? So the questions is something that we're going forward with and asking. The second thing we did is in January, a new director of security will be starting with us. He's a former sergeant with the state. I'd rather not mention his name today, but he's a former sergeant with the Pennsylvania State Police, and we're doing that and our existing director is just moving over the slots. No one's losing their job. It's just a matter of beefing up people that have a lot more experience in doing this than I certainly have, right? And in our discussions, there's some unique things that he feels he can do that'll either further strengthen that, and plus his relations, quite frankly, with the state police on property and everyone else. So, and then finally. We did have a reward program in place, right, that we had last time, right? And I just want to go and say we have, as of Monday, hopefully we can make it. I want to jinx them, okay? We've gone 100 days, and all our security guards will get a bonus for going 100 days without any minors
Well,
getting.
we're pulling for you on that one.
Trust me, we're pulling for it too. I don't like sitting up here, no offense to any of you. So, but, and then Ron will tell you, obviously, we have a lot of successes. We stop a lot of people. And I know that's not what the issue is, but we've stopped a lot more people than the property has ever done before. We take this matter very serious. And again, we're not contending the consent agreement.
Anything
Can I
else?
just ask a question? So between December 30th, 2018, and I know you're not going to be able to give me an exact number, and January 5th, 2019, how many people came through your casino?
I'm going to defer that to Ron.
Sure. Our patron count for the month of January was approximately 122,000. So, you know, doing that math, you're talking roughly 30,000 people probably.
Can I, Jen has a question?
Sure. I
didn't know if you had more.
Oh, I'm perplexed by this, but
I was just wondering, Mr. Carlucci, I'm from Scranton, so I understand when you're talking about the colleges. Have the casino reached out to the colleges and told them, you know, tried to discourage college students from coming out and tried to partner with the colleges? Because sometimes you get in trouble at the colleges for things you do off-site.
That is one of the things that the new director of security has recommended, and he has relationships with the colleges, so we will be doing that.
Are there other questions? I'm sorry, where are we? Is there anything else that you had to add at this point?
Mr. Kuzan wanted to add a few, and Mr. Karpinski wanted to briefly point out a few points.
Thank you. Just a few points. I wanted to just touch on the repercussions to the security officers who let the individuals through. In count one, both of the security officers who let the underage individual pass were issued final written warnings. It was the first time they had any blemish on their record. They were both issued final writtens. On the count number two, the security officer was terminated. He did use the scanning ID technology as he should have. He scanned it, it showed a red X on the screen, and he still permitted them to enter the floor. So he was terminated. In count three, we also terminated that security guard for not properly carding and allowing somebody to enter the floor. So I just wanted to touch on that. And then kind of as you had referenced before, Mr. Commissioner, we have some patron counts and some stats here just to add some color to it. We scan approximately 300,000 IDs a year are going through these scanners. Since 2016, we've increased the percentage of the number of patrons that we have been scanning just because of the use of technology and the awareness and the additional training associated with underage individuals. In 2016, we scanned roughly 11% of people who entered our floor were carded. That is now up to, we're trending at just over 18% in 2019. So there's been a significant increase. And also, year to date, we have turned away nearly 1,400 people who have tried to enter and were either found to have a false identification or were just found to be underage. So we have really been training the staff and taking additional measures. And the final point I wanted to touch on was some of the things we've done internally to limit this from happening again. We've certainly enhanced the training with our entire team. We have, at the main entrance to our facility, it used to be a very wide area. It was approximately 50 feet wide. We have moved our security podium back and narrowed that entrance to approximately 26 feet wide. And now we have 2 security guards stationed there full time. So that is it just makes it a lot more difficult for somebody to come through and avoid the line of sight of a security officer. And those are some of the measures that we've done. And as Tony had mentioned, the additional questioning, the questions that we're going to change up on a weekly basis if we need to. We're going to make sure that we are challenging these folks and making sure they have answers and could answer quickly to our questions.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Karpinski, did you?
So, Mr. Chairman, Board, the surveillance department also takes us very seriously. We all work for the same company, and so we've started working with the security department a while ago now, and each time somebody is identified as being underage and trying to access the floor, the security department will call my department and we'll identify that person. Sometimes in lower light, you know, people leave, they try to change their jacket or their clothes. We then start monitoring the rest of the casino floor for a second attempt. If a second attempt is made, and we will contact security again, security will make sure that they leave the property safely at that point. So we're also trying to assist as much as we can because we understand that those entrances get busy, there's lower light levels, and you can alter your looks pretty quickly, getting denied at one entrance and then taking another shot at another entrance.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the board at this time?
Yeah. So for Enforcement Council, I've scoured our consent agreements on these type of incidents. Is it the fourth count? It seems unusually high to me. Is it the fourth count that raises it substantially to the 110 level? I can't find kind of a similar issue.
The fourth count for each day of access is a $10,000 count, a $10,000
Yeah.
day. And then you have the alcohol service and the distribution of the players' cards, which we added another $10,000 for that. So that, the fourth count is the big one. The others are $10,000 a count.
Is there any, do we need to follow up, or does the casino follow up? I mean, this individual obviously had this person's identification card. Was it stolen? What responsibility do we have?
That would be state police's responsibility.
Did they do anything?
They confiscate the identification from the individual.
The underage individual was also charged with the summary offense of presenting the identification of another individual, to which she ultimately pled guilty.
Okay. I think it's unusually high. I'll vote no, just for the record.
May I have a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the consent agreement between the Office of Enforcement Counsel and Downs Racing LP as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners.
I was a no, Pam.
Pam?
Pam.
Pam? She was a no also.
No also.
So we had Denise, motion, Santoni, second, and no was Sean Logan and Mary.
Yes.
Thank you.
The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is a consent agreement between the Office of Enforcement Counsel and Category 1 licensee Washington Trotting Association, LLC, doing business as the Meadows Casino. The consent agreement will be presented by Assistant Enforcement Counsel Thomas Monahan. Representatives from the Meadows are present. I'd request, you guys both attorneys? Non-attorney witnesses, please stand and be sworn. State your name for the record.
Oh, could you, each of you please state and spell your names?
Ben Kowalski, Vice President of Casino Operations. That's Kowalski.
And Alex Vista, Director of Compliance.
Am I too fast? I'm sorry.
No, I heard you.
Okay.
And Alex Vista, Director of Compliance, HVIZDA.
Good afternoon, Thomas Monahan, M-O-N-A-G-H-A-N with the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter for the board's consideration is a consent agreement between Washington Trotting Association and the OEC regarding incidents involving 2 employees working on expired gaming licenses. The first incident occurred between June 9th, 2018 and September 10th, 2018. On or about September 17th, 2018, the Bureau of Licensing completed a review regarding the Meadows failing to submit an employee's G2 employee occupation permit renewal application on a timely manner. The investigation revealed that the employee's G2 employee occupation permit expired on June 9th, 2018, but the renewal application was not submitted by the Meadows until September 10th, 2018. The Bureau of Casino Compliance conducted a compliance review which revealed that the employee continued to work while his permit was expired. The investigation revealed that between June 9, 2018 and September 10, 2018, the employee worked 70 days on an expired permit. The second incident involves a table games dealer working on an expired permit for 2 days. On or about May 5, 2019, 2019, the Bureau of Casino Compliance was contacted by a table games shift manager regarding a table games dealer with an expired gaming permit. The Bureau of Casino Compliance conducted a compliance review which revealed that the table games dealer failed to renew his gaming permit prior to his expiration on May 2, 2019, and that the table games dealer worked as a dealer at the Meadows on May 3rd and May 4th, 2019 with an expired permit. On May 24th, 2019, a renewal application for the table games dealer was submitted by the Meadows. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board approve this consent agreement between the parties. Terms of the settlement include within 5 days of the board's approving this consent agreement, the Meadow shall pay a civil penalty of $10,000 and an administration fee in the amount of $2,500. If you have any questions, I'm available at this time.
Any questions or comments from the board on this? Hearing none, may I have a motion? I don't know if you wish to speak. If you don't
It's been a long
wish,
meeting. I'll give you just 10 seconds. Just
Okay.
very briefly, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, since this occurred, Meadows has been brought into Penn's HR system, which allows better tracking of license expirations. And we've also instituted a progressive discipline system beginning 6 months before your license will expire, such that if you would get up to the point where your license would expire, you'll already be terminated for pursuant to the progressive discipline.
okay, thank you very much. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the consent agreement between the Office of Enforcement Counsel and Washington Trading Association as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Thank you.
The next four matters on the agenda consist of enforcement actions in which the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed complaints seeking the revocation of one gaming employee occupation permit and one gaming level 2 occupation permit, as well as the suspension of one gaming employee occupation permit and one non-gaming employee registration, which were all issued by the board. Each complaint has been filed with the board's Office of Hearings and Appeal and properly served upon the person named in the complaint. The person named in each complaint failed to respond within 30 days as required by board regulation. As a result, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a request for default judgment and properly served the same upon each named person. Therefore, the facts in each complaint are deemed admitted. All filed documents have been provided to the board, and the matters are presently ripe for the board's consideration. In each instance, we'll provide a brief summary of the facts and request the appropriate board action.
Thomas Monahan, once again with the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is the suspension of the gaming employee permit issued to Richard Brown. In April of 2019, Mr. Brown was arrested and charged with felony carrying of a concealed loaded firearm without a license. The charges remain pending in Chester County. At this time, OEC requests that the board suspend the gaming employee permit issued to Richard Brown.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the suspension of Richard Brown's gaming employee occupation permit as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Good afternoon, Chairman Barish, members of the board. Bradley McAllister, McAllister. The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is the suspension of the non-gaming employee registration issued to Meekanique Youngblood. On or about March 20th, 2019, while patronizing a restaurant, Ms. Youngblood stole credit cards from another patron at the restaurant and used the stolen credit cards to make unauthorized purchases. As a result, Ms. Youngblood was criminally charged with theft by unlawful taking and receiving stolen property, both graded as a felony of the third degree. According to the criminal docket, the felony charges remain pending. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board suspend the non-gaming employee registration issued to Ms. Meekanique Youngblood.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the suspension of Meekanique Youngblood's non-gaming employee registration as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
John Crow, once again for the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is the revocation of the G2 employee permit issued to Mark Crescenzi for his involvement in a scheme to steal from Mohegan Sun Pocono by uploading free slot play onto Players Club cards and having a patron convert that free slot play into cash. Mr. Crescenzi was subsequently charged with access device fraud and possession of a counterfeit access device and terminated from Mohegan Sun. The Office of Enforcement Counsel now requests that the board revoke the G2 employee permit held by Mark Crescenzi.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the revocation of Mark Crescenzi's G2 employee occupation permit described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Good afternoon, Chairman Barish, members of the board. Dustin Miller on behalf of the Office of Enforcement Counsel. Next on the agenda for the board's consideration is a complaint to revoke the gaming employee occupation permit issued to Melina Santos. While employed as a cage cashier at Sugar House Casino, Ms. Santos engaged in unsuitable behavior by intentionally overpaying a patron $200. Ms. Santos was terminated from Sugar House Casino for her actions. She is not presently employed in Pennsylvania's gaming industry. Accordingly, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board revoke Ms. Santos' gaming employee occupation permit.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the revocation of Melina Santos gaming employee occupation permit as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The remaining matters on the agenda consist of enforcement actions in which the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed petitions seeking the involuntary exclusion of individuals whose presence in a licensed facility are inimical to the interests of the Commonwealth and are licensed gaming therein. In each instance, the petition for exclusion has been filed with the Board's Office of Hearings and Appeal and properly served upon the individual named in the petition. The individual named in the petition failed to respond within 30 days as required by Board regulation. As a result, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a request for default judgment in each instance and properly served the same upon each named individual. Therefore, all facts in each petition are deemed admitted. All filed documents have been provided to the Board, and the matters are presently ripe for the Board's consideration. In each instance, as the Board orders a proposed exclusion, each individual's photo, personal identifiers, and a summary of their inimical conduct will be placed on the Board's public website.
Dustin Miller, once again on behalf of the Office of Enforcement Counsel. Next on the agenda for the board's consideration is the request to place Phuong Nguyen on the board's involuntary exclusion list. Ms. Nguyen left an infant child unattended in a vehicle in the parking lot at Sugar House Casino while she was in the casino for approximately 31 minutes gaming. On April 5th, 2019, Ms. Nguyen pleaded guilty to endangering the welfare of children, first-degree misdemeanor. Accordingly, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board place Ms. Nguyen on the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Phuong Nguyen to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Next on the agenda for the board's consideration is a request to place Julie Rinaldi on the exclusion list. On December 31st, 2018, Ms. Rinaldi entered a vehicle in the Rivers Casino parking garage, extracted a firearm, and fired a shot toward the ceiling. When the gun was fired, there were patrons of the casino in the vicinity, and the matter was reported by a patron to security. Ms. Rinaldi was charged and pled guilty to disorderly conduct and unlawful discharge of a firearm in relation to the incident. This time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests the placement of Julie Rinaldi on the PGCB's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board approve the addition of Julianne Rinaldi to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
John Crow again on behalf of the Enforcement Council. The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is the placement of Stephen Fornwell on the board's involuntary exclusion list. Stephen Fornwell stole a cell phone and a cell phone case containing 2 credit cards and cash from another patron while gaming at Mohegans on Pocono. He was charged with theft, receiving stolen property, and conspiracy. The Office of Enforcement Counsel now requests that the board place Stephen Fornwell on the involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Stephen Fortwolf Jr. to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Thomas Monahan, once again with the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next 2 matters on the board's agenda are related. With the board's permission, I will read one set of facts for both individuals. On April 28, 2019, Natalia Vilnius and Sergei Kozalevsky attempted to enter Parks Casino with a 10-year-old child, but were turned away by security. The 2 individuals and the child then entered their vehicle, and Ms. Vilnius and Mr. Kozalevsky exited, leaving the child in the vehicle, and returned to the casino, where they gamed at slot machines for approximately 21 minutes. At this time, OEC requests that the board place Natalia Vilnius on the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Natalia Vilnius to the PGCV involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
At this time, OEC requests that the board place Sergei Kozalevsky on the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Sergei Kozalevsky to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Bradley McAllister, on behalf of the Office of Enforcement Counsel. Final matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is a petition for the placement of Frank Savage on the board's involuntary exclusion list. On May 6, 2019, Mr. Savage left his 8-year-old child unattended in the parking lot of Sugar House Casino for approximately 24 minutes while he entered the casino engaged in gaming activity. Mr. Savage was issued a permanent eviction by Sugar House for his conduct. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requested the board place Frank Savage on the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Frank Savage to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Thank you. That concludes our business.
Thank you. That concludes today's meeting. Next public meeting will be held on Wednesday, November 20th at 10 a.m. in this room. May I have a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Chairman, I move we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted and the meeting is adjourned.